It was nicknamed the Mini-Max for minimum space, maximum maximum size. No, that's the Nissan Juke. I thought I'd start with a blooper just because, well, why not? And this, if you're wondering what the heck this is the optional extra video which for the main Renault Scénic video, and I'll put a link above. So as I allude to in my blooper, there's not a lot of love for the Nissan Juke, certainly not in the comments section of my videos. And to be honest, not a lot from me either. I hired one once and I dubbed it the reverse TARDIS because it was smaller on the inside than it was on the outside. I just don't really get it. Yeah, it didn't really work for us, certainly. Anyway, one of the perks of this channel is to be able to interview designers, people who've been part of the production process of cars, and to be able to pepper them with all kinds of questions. And so it's been really nice to be able to talk to Patrick Lequemont, both for the Twingo, which was honestly one of my favourite cars ever, the Renault Sport Spider, and now of course the Renault Scénic. He actually was very nice to give me two chats. First of all, he said, well, we'll just do a video chat and I'll just bring you up to speed on the whole project, which was fantastic. So I could just ask him whatever questions I liked. And then we did a separate video chat, which was the formal interview when I actually knew what I was talking about. He reminded me of one thing when he was talking about kids getting in the back seat and waiting for hours so that they didn't get the middle seat. And he said his wife didn't want to get in the back of a 2CV when she was young because there's this piece of metal going down the middle of the back seat of a 2CV, and there is, because I got stuck like a mug. Two French kids got on the two other sides in the back of the 2CV and of course stuck me in the middle because I didn't know any difference. And yeah, it's a very painful thing, having this sort of, big metal thing, going down the middle of the seat. Not very good. So I mentioned that Renault's range brought people in to see the Renault Megane Scénic in 1996, but of course the opposite was true as well. The new Megane Scénic, which was winning all these awards, brought people into the showroom where they would see the 1990 Clio, which Renault produced, and the Twingo after that, and now the Megane in 1995, and the Laguna was coming out. And so all these cars that Renault were producing sort of hit after hit after hit. And of course it was helping just to create a great virtuous cycle for them. And of course using the Megane name at the start, the Renault Megane Scénic, certainly helped boost the Megane's image with the much sought after Scénic. So it's kind of an opposite thing where people were saying, oh, there's this Megane Scénic. Oh, there's this other thing called the Megane. Oh, that's a good car. And then they produced the open top version. They had a saloon version come out. So it was a great virtuous circle, as I mentioned. So the more I look through the Nissan and Renault history of the 1990s, and I've been doing a few videos about Renault in this period, and of course I've just done the Nissan Qashqai, I see it as really a period of intense change. They start with the Renault 19, which isn't doing very well, and they think, well, we haven't got much money, so let's reuse the chassis for the Renault Megane, which isn't that unheard of. Essentially just putting a new body on it, a new interior. But then they realize, okay, well, we can take that same chassis and we can make a saloon version, we can make an open top version, we can make the Megane Scénic, we can make another version. And then they're starting to create more and more different variants on the same chassis. And with Patrick also working with the Delta Group to focus on the bottom line and to really focus on cost, reduction of production cost, everywhere that they can see to reduce cost so that they actually make money on each car. What a crazy concept. They start reusing so much more. And then of course Carlos Ghosn enters the picture. He's around certainly in Renault in the late 1990s, moves to Nissan when Renault acquire Nissan, or they do this sort of merger share swap thing that they do with Nissan. And Carlos Ghosn goes over there and just brings those Renault principles of we need to save cost here, everywhere we can and make sure that every car's making a profit. And then, of course, he comes back to Renault. And then, of course, there's this period in the late 2000s where Renault maybe go a little bit too far and just focus on cost, and they're not really focusing on design. And so talking about design, this whole video really is talking about, does extraordinary design matter? So that's one thing, it helps that, I'm interviewing Patrick, and Patrick is very much in the camp of creating extraordinary design. He created the Ford Sierra, of course, and then, of course, all these crazy cars in the 1990s and the Velsatis concept and things like that. Today's cars are bland, but they sell. But you look at cars like the Twingo, the Megane, the Scenic, they sold very well, and a large part of that probably is down to the design of them. Certainly the Twingo, that wouldn't have sold so well if it hadn't been for such sort of cute look and that sort of interesting design that they have. And of course a great price because of the fact that they're reducing costs and being able to produce cars for a reasonable price and actually make a profit. But is there an opening today for extraordinary design? You look at cars today and a lot of them just follow the same design. That's not to say they aren't interesting, but they're all very much the same. There are exceptions. You look at things like the Nissan Cube, cars like that. But most cars are generally pretty similar. And I made a video about it saying why are more modern cars so boring. Or does it really matter? At the end of the day, this video is sort of opening that question and saying, does it matter? Does it not matter? It's really up to you to decide. So anyway, the Scenic may be over or it may not be over, but many of the elements from the Renault Scenic have been taken over to other cars. Cup holders, more storage bins, foldable and removable rear seats. Elements like this have been taken over, and cars today are a lot more practical in their interiors than they were before the Renault Scenic. So particularly crossovers, they have a lot of similarities today with the MPVs of old. They look a little bit different, they're a little bit more cool, but they're essentially MPVs. There's a lot of similarity between the two. So the name MPV might be over because it was sort of seen as rather dull and boring, but the ideas from the Renault Scenic and other MPVs that followed, the third row of seats, those ideas have lived on. It's a shame to me, though, that the fun element of the original, certainly the Scenic concept and the Scenic in 1996, the fun elements of those seem to have died. I love the idea of the imaginary world carpet. And, I've spent hours looking into patterns and reading more into it than ever was there before. And you can imagine on these long, boring car journeys that you just sort of stare at this carpet or stare at elements of the car and just let your imagination run wild. Whereas now, particularly, you look at the latest Scenics, it's just this big sea of black. And there's obviously practical reasons why we have this sea of black, because it's practical. You can wipe seats down easily, they don't show stains, and there's a lot of good practical reasons. But I do feel that we've just lost something, and having exciting cars that have some character to them would be quite nice anyway. Of course, you noticed at the end of the video I had a quote from David Tuhig, and the reason I did that was because I was interviewing him about the Nissan Qashqai, but at the same time I was starting work on the Renault Scenic script and also starting to interview Patrick. So because of that, I asked him to do a quote about the Renault Scenic, which was very nice of him to do that. But there was a longer quote where he talks a little bit more about it, so I'll insert that here now.
So I think the impact of the Megane Scenic really can't be underestimated, because first of all, it was the vehicle, I would say, that provided the cash resources that Renault required to invest in, buy, and rescue Nissan effectively. It had been a massive commercial success. So I actually think it's not an exaggeration to say that the alliance would not have happened without the Megane Scenic, because it was the treasury that allowed the alliance to be created. It had been a big impact on Nissan before the alliance. We had tried, and I speak as a Nissan person at the time, we had tried to kind of do our own Megane Scenic in the Almira Tino, based on the Almira hatchback and built in the Barcelona plant. But frankly speaking, that vehicle was not a success. It did not attract, it simply did not succeed as the Megane Scenic had. After the alliance, of course, this was still an opportunity for us. And as we've described in a separate conversation, Nissan considered doing a vehicle that was somewhere between a conventional hatchback and something like the Megane Scenic. That vehicle never saw the light of day. It was codenamed B32A. And finally, it was that design process and studying that potential vehicle that led Nissan onto the affordable crossover segment and the vehicle that would go on to become Qashqai. So in a rather indirect way, I think there are some links between the success of the Megane Scenic and the great eventual success for Nissan of the Nissan Qashqai.
Well, thanks very much for watching this optional extra video. If there's some other videos, if you want to watch those. Thanks for watching the main video, and I'll see you in the next video.